The movie kicks off with a chaotic morning scene in the middle of a traffic jam, where we meet Emile and his father, Francois. They're caught in a heated argument because Emile refuses to go to the doctor's appointment, and his stubbornness has already made them late. Frustrated by his father's nagging, Emile eventually storms out of the car, forcing Francois to chase after him. As they argue on the street, they notice something strange. A nearby ambulance begins to shake violently, accompanied by terrifying screams. Suddenly, the windows shatter, and Francois quickly pulls Emile into hiding. They watch in shock as the ambulance doors burst open, revealing a creature that's part bird, part human, landing on top of a car. Chaos ensues as security officers rush in to capture the mutant, but the creature fights back fiercely, terrifying everyone stuck on the road. The mutant overpowers the officers, throwing them aside, and makes a run for it to escape, leaving chaos in its wake. Later on, Emile and Francois make their way to the hospital to meet with the doctor caring for Emile's mother, Lana, who is also undergoing a disturbing transformation into an animal-like creature. For the past 2 years, people across the country have mysteriously started mutating into these animalistic forms. These mutations often lead to aggressive behavior, causing fear and chaos. The authorities are doing everything they can to capture these mutants and confine them in specialized facilities, where they're kept sedated and studied in hopes of finding a cure. Fear of the mutants has spread, and most people believe they should be locked away for everyone's safety. Emile, still shaken from a past encounter where his mother accidentally scratched his face, hesitates to visit her, but Francois insists that she's still family and deserves their support. The doctor informs them about a newly established reception center in the south, which offers more advanced facilities for treating mutants. Francois quickly agrees to the transfer, seeing it as an opportunity for a fresh start for him and Emile, away from the judgmental eyes of those who know Lana. As they enter Lana's room, Emile is struck by the sight of numerous scratch marks on the walls and keeps his distance. Francois sits down beside her, believing that talking to her might provide some comfort, but Emile doubts she can truly comprehend their words. Weeks later, the family, along with their dog, settles into their new home near the forest. Emile starts attending a new school, where his teacher introduces him to the class. When a curious classmate named Nina bombards him with questions, Emile decides to lie, telling her that his mother has passed away and claiming that his scar was caused by a lightning strike. That night, a powerful storm sweeps through the town, knocking out the power and jolting Emile awake with the howling wind and flashes of lightning. Curious, he gets up to look out the window, but is taken aback by a creature peering inside. Just as Francois restores the electricity, the creature vanishes. The following day, an emergency call summons them to the local lake, where police and firefighters have cordoned off the area. They learn that the storm caused an ambulance to veer off the road and plunge into the lake. As they watch a police officer recover a body from the water, Francois's heart sinks. This ambulance was transporting mutants to the new center, and now half of them are dead while others have escaped. In a panic, Francois is restrained by officers as he calls out for his wife. Officer Julia reassures him, saying they haven't found Lana's body, which means she could still be somewhere in the forest. When they get back home, Francois begins hanging their clothes on the trees around the house, believing that the familiar scent might lead Lana back to them. The next day, in gym class, the teacher organizes a game of tug-of-war, and to Emile's surprise, his entire team collapses to the ground, leaving him standing alone. Remarkably, he manages to pull hard enough to hold his ground until his teammates can regroup and help him secure a victory. Afterward, his classmates are impressed with his strength and invite him to a party. However, Emile becomes preoccupied with examining his fingers and rushes back home. Once there, he uses tweezers to dig something out from beneath his nails, screaming in pain as he does so. To his horror, he uncovers small claws, a shocking sign that he is beginning to mutate as well. Emile then turns to the mirror to examine his back, only to discover that the shape of his spine is also changing. Overcome with rage and frustration, he starts throwing things around the bathroom before stepping into the tub to wash away his feelings of shame. His loyal dog joins him in the tub, offering comfort in his distress. Meanwhile, Francois heads to the mailbox and runs into Officer Julia, who informs him that the search for Lana has been called off because the government has promised to deploy the military. Just then, they hear screams from inside the mall, where shoppers have spotted a mutant. Julia quickly directs her team to evacuate the building, but Francois, desperate to find the mutant, searches for any sign of Lana. To his surprise, the creature turns out to be a squid-like mutant, merely seeking some fish to eat. When it realizes it has been discovered, it hurls a box of shrimp at them before making a swift escape. As the squid mutant hurls random food items at Julia while she chases after her, the officer remains undeterred. With impressive agility, Julia leaps onto the creature to capture it. Meanwhile, Francois spots another mutant cowering beneath a grocery display, but he decides to keep this information to himself and not alert the authorities. The following Friday, Emile attends the party, where he has a great time socializing with his classmates. They gather around to admire some swords brought by a guest who will be presenting at the upcoming Midsummer Festival. However, the alcohol soon starts to make Emile feel unwell, and he ends up falling off his seat. In a moment of kindness, Nina offers him some medicine, but Emile's body uncontrollably licks her hand to retrieve it, startling everyone around him. Feeling embarrassed and ashamed, Emile slips away into the forest, where he can hear the distant sounds of other mutants. The following morning, Emile awakens by the lake, startled by the sound of a motorboat passing nearby. He discovers blood in his mouth and instinctively spits it out as he makes his way home, noticing anti-mutant graffiti along the route. Once at home, he rushes to the bathroom and vomits up a feather, a shocking reminder that he must have eaten a bird the previous night. Later, Francois and Emile decide to disregard the police barriers and head into the forest in search of Lana. As they walk, Emile turns to his father and asks how he felt when Lana began to change. Francois reassures him, explaining that he was never afraid. To him, she was still his wife, albeit a little different. As night falls, they resume their search from the car, shouting out of the windows while blasting Lana's favorite song at full volume. They end up spending the night in the vehicle, and by morning, Emile notices his nails are changing once again. Suddenly, his dog bolts away, prompting Emile to chase after him. He soon finds a chameleon child perched in a tree. In a shocking turn of events, the Birdman from earlier leaps out and tackles Emile to the ground, flapping his wings and striking him, causing painful scratches on his shoulder that start to bleed. However, the Birdman suddenly stops when he locks eyes with Emile and realizes that he, too, is a mutant. Emile's screams draw Francois to his son's side, and he quickly grabs Emile's arm, warning the Birdman to keep his distance. Back in the car, Francois declares that they're heading to the hospital, but Emile protests, fearing that the truth about his condition will be revealed. Their heated argument nearly results in a collision with a horse, but Francois manages to stop just in time, and they realize they've arrived at the riding school. Officers are on the scene, and Julia informs them that a mutant has attacked the horses. Seizing the opportunity, Francois asks for a favor. An army nurse ends up stitching Emile's shoulder, believing his story that a dog bit him. Later, at home, Emile carefully removes some of the stitches and starts licking the oozing wound. During lab class sometime later, Emile spots Nina wearing a necklace adorned with a feather similar to the one he had vomited, causing him to panic. Nina immediately calls him out for his reaction. Struggling to focus, he becomes distracted by the squeaking of ferrets in their cage. Frustrated, he finally snaps and shouts at them to be quiet. After class, Emile finds it difficult to ride his bike due to his ongoing physical changes. Nina, determined to be supportive, invites him to hang out at her house. While preparing a snack, Emile opens the fridge and discovers a dead bird inside. Nina explains that she found it at her doorstep after the party and took a feather from it for her necklace. Emile realizes that he hadn't eaten the bird after all. He had left it for her as a gift. Nina intends to keep it because she plans to donate it as food for the mutants. Afterward, Emile wades into the lake and successfully catches a fish with his bare hands, a feat witnessed by a nearby neighbor. He then sets out to find the Birdman, who is struggling to fly and repeatedly crashing to the ground. Emile decides to leave the fish for him and learns that the Birdman calls himself Fix, having forgotten his real name. Noticing the injuries on Fix from his failed attempts at flying, Emile suggests a safer place to practice and leads Fix to the lake. Once they arrive, Emile clears away the branches from the water to prevent any further accidents, and Fix agrees that it's a good spot to hone his skills. Later that evening, as Emile attempts to ride his bike home, he keeps falling off, leading him to abandon it in the forest. He plans to tell his dad that it was stolen. Meanwhile, at the bar where Francois works, he discovers that the owner has been selling anti-mutant t-shirts, which leaves him feeling very uneasy. After taking out the trash, he hears strange noises coming from the backyard and is suddenly grabbed by a mutant who forcefully pushes him to the ground. Noticing that the creature is chained, Francois attempts to soothe it, but he catches sight of a second mutant fleeing the scene. Just then, a coworker intervenes, pushing the creature back with an oar and revealing that it's a relative she's been hiding at work. Together, she and Francois try to coax the mutant back into hiding, but it panics and bolts to the front of the bar, causing a chaotic rush of patrons fleeing in fear. Worried that the other creature might have been Lana, Francois dashes into the forest and finds his wife in full bear form. She makes a sound in his direction before disappearing into the trees. Later, during lunch at school, Emile feels something odd in his mouth and suddenly spits out a tooth. His classmates react with disgust, prompting him to claim it was just a baby tooth. In the afternoon, he goes to visit Fix, who is still struggling to learn to fly and keeps crashing into the water. When Fix takes a break, Emile examines his injuries and removes the bandage covering his face, horrified to discover that the doctors had botched the surgery intended to remove his growing beak. That evening, Julia joins Francois in the forest to help search for Lana, and they have to hide whenever a police car drives by. Despite their efforts, they don't encounter any creatures, but Francois is taken aback when he stumbles upon Emile's abandoned bicycle. When Francois returns home, he discovers that the bathroom sink is clogged. As he removes the pipe to clear it, he finds a collection of hair and some claws inside, a startling realization that Emile is undergoing changes as well. When Emile arrives home shortly after, Francois confronts him with the claws and the bicycle, but Emile vehemently denies any involvement. Frustrated, Francois locks the house and refuses to let Emile inside until he confesses. In a panic, Emile attempts to escape, but a determined Francois chases after him and tackles him to the ground, holding him tightly as he breaks down in tears. The following morning, Emile starts to eat directly from his plate instead of using a fork, but Francois remains supportive. He even shares some of Lana's medication with Emile, hoping it will help him manage his impulses during class. Francois then examines Emile's mouth and notes that his fangs are still at the back, hidden from view. He reminds Emile to trim his nails daily and places cotton in his ears, covering them with his hair to help manage his enhanced hearing and avoid being overwhelmed by loud noises. Lastly, Francois demonstrates how to use hair removal cream on his body. Later that day, while taking a walk outside the house, Emile chats with Nina on the phone. He asks her to scream, and he beams with joy when he realizes he can hear her all the way from where he is. The next day, Emile visits Fix and is startled to find that Fix can no longer speak. He can only make bird-like sounds. After sharing a hug with Emile, Fix climbs a tree and leaps off, showcasing his newfound ability to fly and reveling in the experience. Afterward, Emile heads to the festival where his father is working. Francois is enraged to see him, insisting that Emile should be hiding. Their argument quickly escalates into a physical confrontation, during which Emile growls and bites his father on the shoulder, refusing to let go until Francois threatens him with scissors. Distressed and bewildered, Emile walks away and runs into Nina, who suggests they take a stroll through the cornfields. The two teens share a kiss, and things heat up quickly, leading them to lie down together. When Emile takes off his shirt, Nina notices the hair and the changes in his spine, but she reassures him that she already suspected something was different about him and continues forward with what they're doing. Later, they return to the festival, and while in the bathroom, Emile is confronted by a classmate who witnessed him and Nina in the fields. The boy activates a small device that emits a sound only animals should be able to hear, and the noise immediately pierces Emile's ears in a painful way. In a panic, Emile lashes out at the boy, leaving scratch marks across his face. He quickly runs away to hide in the cornfields while the boy runs off to alert the locals, who gather weapons and call the police. Soon, a dog approaches him, but Emile lets out a fierce bark, scaring the animal away. Seeing the dog flee, two men begin firing in that direction, triggering alarms to go off. Emile sprints away as a crowd chases after him, and just as one man aims his weapon at him, Fix swoops in, knocking the man aside and fatally wounding him with his claws. Fix then flies toward the forest, urging Emil to follow him. A police car joins the pursuit, and as Emil crosses the lake to evade them, the frustrated officers fire across the water, tragically hitting Fix. Emil rushes to his friend's side, weeping as Fix takes his final breath in his arms. Minutes later, Francois and the hunters discover Fix's lifeless body, but there is no sign of Emil. Meanwhile, in town, a large mutant lurks in the shadows as army trucks head toward the forest. The next day, Emil remains hidden among the trees, foraging for any fruit he can find to survive. As evening falls, he climbs a tree and joins the chorus of nocturnal creatures, howling along with them. That night, a storm sweeps through the area, prompting Emil to seek shelter in a cave. He becomes frightened when he is approached by a bear, only to realize that it is his mother, Lana. They gently bump their foreheads together, a silent acknowledgement of their love for one another. Lana then turns to leave, urging her son to follow her. Emil obeys and discovers a hidden community of mutants living together in harmony, including the Camillon girl. Suddenly, he notices flares shooting up into the sky, signaling that the army has located them. Emil and the other mutants scramble to flee and hide, but the soldiers unleash a painful sound that causes the creatures to collapse in agony, making them easy targets for capture. The only one who manages to evade capture is the chameleon girl, who cleverly blends into her surroundings. Later, at the police station, Francois assists Emil in stating that he had been drunk and accidentally wandered into the forest. However, when it comes time for Emil to sign the release papers, he struggles to grip the pen, causing him to tear the sheet instead. When the officer hands him a new pen, Emil can't suppress a low growl, prompting the officer to notice that he's a mutant too, but Francois to act quickly. He shoves the cop, knocking him to the ground before he can raise the alarm. The officer hits his head and loses consciousness as Francois swiftly signs the document himself. He then presents it to the receptionist and successfully escapes with Emil. Once outside, they jump into the car to flee the town. Soon, police cars are in pursuit, but Francois assures Emil that he won't let them take his son to any institution. He presses on the gas pedal and crashes through a fence to enter the forest. He then tells Emil to run, and the boy takes off, howling in joy. And that's where the movie ends. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more recaps. See you in the next one.